that has not been also informed to the public, just as the Nadco report is not really informed to the benefit and the consumption of the young people to understand it fully. I wonder what will be your rebuttal.
Well, he's dealt with a lot of issues, yeah? But what interests me the most is the SHA issue, where he says that, you know, when SHA was beginning, there were problems, hospitals were shutting down, and that is no longer the issue right now. But we have a bigger issue. In fact, at the front line of the headline of Daily Nation, we are talking about a 50 billion SHA ripoff. You know, anytime billions are mentioned in this country, we take it so lightly. I don't know if we know the value of 1 billion Kenya shillings. For us to even understand the value of 50 billion Kenya shillings ripoff, where hospitals are reporting that a person has been operated on surgery done on a person 4 times. I think that's what the Daily Nation is saying. Within one day, one person has been operated on 4 times by the same doctors. You're hearing stories of a mother giving birth 10 times in 1 year, as if that is something that is possible. So we are talking about scandals that, even if, in as much as we'd want to say the teething problems of SHA at the beginning are no longer there, we are now even facing bigger problems that need to be dealt with, that are affecting ordinary mwananchi. I'm hearing him saying that, you know, universities, before the funding model came, universities were at the brink of collapsing, and now that the universities are stable. But at the end of the day, a parent who is paying school fees is asking himself, during the Uhuru Kenyatta regime, I could afford school fees. Now I can't. You know, for us as Kenyans, it boils down to the simple questions of, can I afford it? Can I not afford it? The issue of, oh, you know, these are programs that are stabilizing the economy, and then later on we will see money in the pocket. When is later on? 5 years, I believe, of leadership and governance were placed in our constitution with the idea in mind that within 5 years, you will have done what you promised to have done. And I'm not happy when these statements like what he's saying come up, because in 2027, that's where they will hoodwink you again. They will tell you the first 5 years were for laying a foundation. Now give us another 5 years more for us to see what. If whatever you need to be doing in the next 5 years that you'll be telling us you'll do, you should have done in the first 5 years. There's a reason as to why we had 5 years of leadership. Some countries have 4 years of governance, and things are done. In those 4 years, you hear presidents talking about reforms that have changed the livelihoods of the people. Look at Obama during his first 4 years of administration. A lot was achieved and accomplished that could be laid down to paper, and you'd say A, B, C, D, F, G, H. He never came back to the people and told them, you know what, these first 4 years were for me to lay a foundation, so give me another 4 years for me to perform. He was given another 4 years because on the first 4 years, he actually performed. So I think the government is trying to sell us a story right now through people like Wakili here. Slowly by slowly, you'll be hearing more of them telling us, you know, we were just laying a foundation for university. Now, after that, university will be affordable. We were just laying a foundation for SHA. Now, you no longer hear of the 50 billion conversations about scandals of 50 billion Kenya shillings. And by the way, in my opinion, I believe that there's a lot more corruption that is going on in this government that has just not been exposed. And I wish we could have more whistleblowers like in the Uhuru Kenyatta administration. In as much as this government would like to paint the Uhuru Kenyatta administration as one of the most corrupt administrations, you know, sometimes you can be painted as one of the most corrupt because there are systems in place for us to expose the corruption. So I wonder if now 50 billion is coming out right now, how much more of corruption scandals are we yet to experience, or are we yet to be told about, that we are waiting to hear about, you know? So I really wish that before 2027, we can have more of exposés about what is happening in this government. Because the only way you can explain why an ordinary mwananchi in a government that is supposedly thriving is not doing well as compared to the economy that is supposedly doing well, the only way to explain it is that there is massive corruption ongoing. Because if there's nothing else to explain, if there's nothing else to tell us by government, if government can't tell us why we cannot afford to live life as we used to afford to live it in the past, then the only way to explain it is that there is massive corruption that nobody is talking about, that we hope comes to light. On the issue of Nadco, by the way, the only reason why I would tell you that Kenyans don't even know what is in it for them is because there really isn't anything in it for them. If there was something in it for them, they would take an interest. You know, you only take an interest where your interests are addressed. You take an interest to know that, okay, fine, there's a Nadco report, a 10-point agenda report that is here, and I've had this and this being said that will benefit me as a citizen. The fact that citizens don't know much about it should tell you that there really isn't anything there for the mwananchi. It is just a political document, like I said, that is meant to facilitate two people coming together, and they have already come together So they don't even need any further justification to continue being together. They should just agree and tell us we came up with a document to justify why we are coming back together or why we are coming together and joining forces, and we have now joined forces, and therefore the document makes no sense. There's no need to drag this thing into 2027, because if it was a 10-point agenda that ought to have been achieved in 2024, 2025, why hasn't it been achieved till this particular point?
I think
just a moment, because I think that particular question of this Nadco report being a political document is very key. And this was largely predicated on, the ascension of Raila Odinga from where he was as from Azimio into the broad-based government. Now that he is not there, and we've heard even Edwin Sifuna saying we are not coming to actually attend this meeting today. He will be a no-show. And he is a very critical also, person to be in. We saw him reading that particular statement during, the shaking
signing
of hand, the signing of it. I wanted just to ask you, Raila is not here. So what is the rhyme or reason of having this particular Nadco report? Because this was really fashioned to actually accommodate him into government.
Now, so just to answer...
All these that we have, the 10 points, they're just bells and whistles around what the main agenda was, the installation of Raila Odinga, especially he coming up with that infrastructure of accommodating a prime minister within our political structure.
Now, for the Nadco report, it served two purposes. And I think Nadco was the technical aspect. The political aspect was the coming together of UDA and ODM. I think we've mentioned that, and that's not a secret. And it was basically between Raila Odinga, the late, and the current president. But importantly, as I've said, there was a backdrop to that. And I think having been in these shows before, we can competently say that since 2022, our trajectory of politics changed. The Kenyans at the moment, or since 2022, have had this expectation that any political conversation must be tailored around issues and agendas. Have you realized, Dibal, as we debate and engage here, we've not been speaking about personalities. We've actually spoken about the issues. Through and through, from the first minute we started conversing, it is one issue after the other. So the basis of this political pact between ODM and UDA had to be anchored on an issue. Number two, the Gen Z protest, which I want to say, the Gen Z protest, the way we've called it Gen Z, because it was youth-led, but it spoke of the Kenyan problems that predates the youth themselves. It goes back to the independence. It is, for me, what I've come to Christian as the governance moment, where the demand for governance reforms are here. Previously, it was constitutional reforms, it was institutional reforms, but this one goes to the governance and political culture we have in place, which speaks of the specific issues that people want addressed. So that the Nadco report basically bringing together the two leaders, bringing together the parties, was on the political side. And that explains why Sifuna, for example, is no longer part and parcel to it. Why? As Raila Odinga was signing with the president then, Sifuna was also opposed to it. In fact, it was an awkward moment for him as a Secretary General to be the one appending the signature. Did you even notice in the first instance it was Ledama Olekina who was placed in? Sifuna only came in as the official and the substantive SG to put in, as well as on the other side of UDA, Hassan Omar signing. And you could see the awkwardness he had. And even his speech was bullish that day, where he said, we are primarily here on these specific issues. That tells you from the word go, he was not for it. So this particular coming together of the two political parties, and with the elections coming into play, will play out. Sifuna and the team have already bolted. I don't think they are still part and parcel of ODM. Linda Mwananchi has already acquired a life of its own. It's now a political outfit. The only thing that remains is the clothing. And there is never a problem with the Kenyan politics. Kenyan politics, every 5 years, it's a question of parties and movements are like clothes. We've not matured our politics where we anchor in parties that can subsist. I can assure you, Dibal, I cannot tell you with certainty that outside Raila Odinga, how long ODM will survive. UDA survives under the strength and the leadership that exists because of, one, the president. Jubilee was Uhuru Kenyatta. PNU was Kibaki. NAC was a constellation of the individual leaders then. Ford Kenya was then Kijana Wamalo. That's why Wetangula has never sustained it. If you talk about Ford Asili, then it was Matiba. Our political parties and movements are still beholden to individual, but that is changing. I feel the emergence of Sifuna and the rest are basically a new version of politics that where the personality will not dictate. It will be more of a movement or ideas. So that as we go to this meeting today between ODM and UDA, it is ODM proper minus Sifuna. The Babowinos, the Sifunas, the Osotsis, that's what under the bridge. Did you realize over the weekend they were in Ukambani? That tells you where they are. Number two, did you see the changes in Azimio yesterday? It completely removed all the ODM leadership that are in government. So that one is a schism that has completely finished the thing. And finally, it doesn't mean then that our political conversation will only revolve around individual who is where what. The Nadco then becomes important because the 2027 election will be a referendum on the issues and the promises that the Kenya Kwanza regime gave in 2022. And I wanted to frame it this way. As a matter of fact, the biggest question that the government of the day will face is, you promise economic salvation. How much of this salvation have we received? You promised to ensure we have money in the pocket. How much have you delivered? And that is why I'm framing it. And that's why if you see where my framing was coming from was, the answer then will lie as to the specific projects and programs they have done. Just one of them I wanted to answer, which is mentioned about SHA. It just captured what I've just mentioned. If you look at this 50 billion menace that they have mentioned, the Ministry of Health has been quoted, quote unquote, they say, we view this audit not as a critique, but as an invaluable statutory tool that has played a critical role in helping us identify early transition gaps and continuously strengthen our internal controls. These particular losses happened between 2024-25. As I've said, when the program was launched, it was chaotic. The government even came on board and the president had to step in and say, okay, we didn't do it well, but we have to do something different. So 2027, this 1 year will be very critical for the government. This is the first time now, it will be now agenda setting, communication of that, where they said, when we came in, we had promised economic revival. This is what we've done. We've only achieved 65%, but these are the proposals that are already going, and we can showcase how much we started, how much we've done. So that if you talk about SHA, you can say, do you guys remember how chaotic it was? Do you remember how everyone said, let's go back to NHIF? But have we kind of made movements? That will be the conversation. And I think Nadco today, this report today, is kind of setting a benchmark for a marking scheme that the government of the day will be judged. The opposition will be waiting today to read all those, because if you look at the 10-point agenda, it talks about devolution. The opposition will be waiting to hear, hey, what have you done about devolution? Government on one part will say, we have tripled or we have done more funding to the devolved system, we've given more responsibilities and functions to the county governments, and we've strengthened devolution. Opposition will say, is that enough? Has that created a solution? They'll say, for example, we talked about economic revival. We talk about trying to ensure things work well. So how much have we done? So the Nadco report for me today is basically the agenda setting issues that will dictate how the conversation the next 6 months will be between government and opposition.
This memorandum of understanding, according to the Secretary General and that particular faction, has expired. And it expired March the 7th.
And that is
which was on Saturday.
That is very
so even this particular, presentation of the report itself on the progress is just a PR,
It's not a PR. I feel it's a layover. As you said very well, Nadco was between Raila and William Ruto, right? Raila is no longer there. But the parties stand, UDA, ODM. Is it still the same ODM as Raila? No, it has fractured. Part of the ODM is already out in opposition. The remnant ODM, that what I call the institutional ODM, led by Wanga and the rest, is there. So what is going to happen today? Nadco is basically going to be the bridge within which to say, this was the foundation of our relationship. Now we have to then renew the relationship by auditing what we've achieved and say, are we then in a place where we can cement and consummate this political marriage, which then would culminate into the NDC. Keep an eye on the NDC that ODM has already announced. Because from today is an audit and say, is it good enough for us now to go to the NDC and say, let us consummate? That's what I see Nadco is going to.
Ruth, your sentiments, as also we give our closing remarks as well. Time has really ticked up to wait. It's amazing.
My closing remarks are that it would be insensitive of us to sit here and discuss Nadco when Nairobi has been sinking the past few days because of the rains that have been taking place. We are told by the Standard frontline page that 28 deaths are confirmed as of Sunday evening, 30 people rescued alive, 30 plus people, 700 plus homes, 800 households displaced, and 70 plus vehicles washed away and damaged and swept away. that this points to a big problem that Nairobi needs addressing, and it's a governance issue. It's an issue of who have we elected at the helm of our leadership. Yes, I understand that there are certain issues and problems that Nairobi faces that are beyond the current administration, but what has the current administration done to ensure that these issues don't continue as it were? For example, drainage. We've had structures that have been in place for a while now that the current regime cannot take responsibility for. But then when the current regime came to power, they knew, and they've always known, that whenever it rains, these are issues that we face as a country. And we have the meteorological department that tells us that it's going to rain in the next few days. Can we prepare ourselves in advance for this? Again, we have the issue of further buildings being built without alignment to the structural components of building that defy the laws of the rules of drainage systems being defied, and even just Nairobi itself being a dirty Nairobi that blocks and clogs the pathways of water. So it points to a bigger problem of governance. It points to a problem of who is at the helm of leadership. And I've always said time and time again that Nairobi, for once, Nairobi is not just an ordinary county that you would say Nairobi needs a politician, Nairobi needs a manager, Nairobi needs somebody who understands how Nairobi works, how to manage a unit of administration that is not necessarily any other unit of administration. It is the capital city of our country. You can imagine the kind of image and picture we are painting out there of a city that has sunk. I'm sure the tourists who visited that day were wondering, where are we? Are we really in as much as my friend here was saying Kenya is a third world country? No, we are beyond being a third world country. We are above a third world country. A country that is above a third world country that is sinking, a city who's sinking. And it's not just Nairobi itself only, but other parts of the country. I think as we go into the next elections, whoever will be vying for governorship positions should be people that we should be critically thinking about in terms of their qualifications to manage counties, not just to be politicians and politic, but can they manage a unit of administration? The governorship position is not one that should be left to politicians. It should be left to managers. Like Nairobi has various aspirants right now who are vying, and I think out of all those aspirants, there's only one who seems to have managerial qualities, and in my opinion, it is Irungu Nyakera.
You're right. Irungu Nyakera never even resurfaced.
I want to agree on this one.
On that
opinion poll.
Of the opinion poll that we have from the Star.
I want to fully agree with her. If there's one thing, Nairobi has been a colossal disaster. The kind of promise and the expectation, when I look at the forward of the newspaper, Sakaja, one person I worked with when I was a speaker, and he was in the Senate, because Senate was always more or less like they are the prefects of the county assemblies, and they were always our go-to older brothers. It has been a colossal disaster. One thing, that one I agree completely with Ruth. However, I disagree on the bit of it needs a manager per se. It needs a mixture of both. One of the biggest problems for governance system, especially at the
we're winding up, yes.
In fact, that is my closing. One of the biggest challenges for county governments is always a careful balance between managerial requirement and political requirement, because you also need the management of politics, because politics is about managing people and affairs and expectations.
Yes.
I know very well that will be a requirement. Even for Irungu Nyakera to succeed, he'll have to also balance with the politics. But then, just to understand how big a issue Nairobi is and why it has been such a bigger mess, I think by the time you see the president and the national government stepping in, it is a realization that this has been a colossal failure and something has to give. And I'm just sad to say, being a resident of Nairobi, this was not the expectation.
Thank you.
The expectation was better. However, I will not throw the baby on the bathwater and say county governments and devolution doesn't work. It still works. There's room for the same. It's a question of how do we strengthen intergovernance between national and county. And Nairobi, the way the national government has decided to pump in 80 billion is a plus. But it should not come at the expense of taking away the functions, but rather it should be complementary. That's why I'm happy with this cooperation agreement. It was not a constitutional change, but just more or less an intergovernmental codependence between the two. So
sharing of functions.
Yes. So as we go to 2027, my answer would be a question of let us objectively see through what works and what can be a plus as we seek to progress the country, which is not third world, I say developing country.
Thank you. All right, Joshua Kipto, former Speaker of Nandi County and advocate of High Court, Ruth Amboga as well, who is a lawyer and a political strategist. Thank you for coming through. Very wonderful discussion. I think we should have had more time to interrogate more issues as well. And it seems today also is a Wakili Day here in the House, because Ruth Tanui, she's coming up to talk about workers' rights and versus employers' power. And this will be handled by